Hi, welcome to a special edition of Education Matters. We're going to be looking at the new curriculum that has been implemented by, signed into law by Governor Murphy, passed in the legislature in January, the AAPI, Asian American Pacific Islander curriculum. With me, I have three guests. I have Dr. Lu, who's from NYU, New York University. I have Laura Choi from a school board member in Warren County. And then I have Sima Kumar, who's a high school teacher. So they're going to look at it from different perspectives, and we'll talk about why it's important and how you can start implementing this into your curriculum relatively easily. So I'm going to start with, I guess, with you, Laura. The state legislature, as I said before, passed the bill. It's signed into law about AAPI instruction. Why do you think this is important?
Well, that is a great question, right? I think, so as somebody, I'm a first generation immigrant who grew up in New York City, and I'm raising three children in Warren County, New Jersey, of all places. I just think in education, we have this concept of having windows and mirrors, that our curriculum and our representation that the children see should act like windows and mirrors, mirrors in terms of where they can see themselves reflected in their curriculum, in the books that they read, in the stories that they read, in the exposure that they have, and windows for children who are not exposed, who are not familiar with the world outside their little community, or to learn about people, to learn about other kids just like them. So, when we cultivate and I guess nurture that kind of culture, it creates a sense of belonging for all children, so they don't feel inclusive curriculums like this just fosters the sense of belonging for all children, no matter their background, their abilities, or however they identify. Yeah, so I just think that's really important. I just want to give a small little anecdote. Earlier this year, my fifth grader, my youngest, came home with a guided reading book on Patsy Mink, and I cried because I didn't learn about Patsy Mink until like a few years ago in my, I don't know, maybe I was 40 or upper 30s, so because I sought out that information and I wanted to learn. I finally wanted to learn about history of my people in this country, right? So, and then it wasn't intentional. It was just the new guided reading book, but to have my kid be exposed and learn about this, I just thought it was so important. And that, for Patsy Mink was a legislator who didn't go to med school and didn't go to law school because she was rejected because she was an Asian American woman. And she ran for Congress, and her biggest accomplishment was Title IX, which all children benefit from. Co-ed sports, co-ed classes that are not gendered anymore. That's for her, that's from her work. And so I think all children should learn about her, and I didn't as a kid. So that's why it's important.
Interesting. Seema, do you have anything to add to that as to why you feel it's important?
Absolutely. And if I could just talk a little bit about the history of this bill, the push to pass these bills was a response to the rise in anti-Asian racism as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, and the idea behind grassroots movements like Make Us Visible New Jersey was that education is the antidote to hate. So this is really the momentum that brought these bills to our state legislation. And I would say that in the classroom, I see that our students are part of the most diverse, racially and ethnically diverse generation this country has ever had. And it's about time that the curriculum that we're teaching in the classroom reflects the demographic changes, specifically, in the classroom, but also, nationally.
Great. I forgot about the pandemic and that hatred that came pretty quickly after that. So, Dr. Lu, Sima talked about, and so did Laura, about Make Us Visible. Who is Make Us Visible? What is your mission? Because, a lot of people may not know that. And so can you explain a little bit about Make Us Visible?
Sure. So we are we're a grassroots group. It's a coalition of students, parents, and educators, and also professionals and legislators in New Jersey. Our goal is to advocate for thoughtful and comprehensive inclusion of Asian American and Pacific Islander studies in K-12 curriculum in New Jersey public schools. So our group was founded in spring 2021, as Sima mentioned, in response to the rising anti-Asian hate incidents. Because I'm a mother, I'm a professor in my professionally, but I'm also a mother of two elementary school and middle school age kids. So it was very concerning about the Asians are experiencing double pandemic, right? And we felt like we need to do something. So the group was founded by Dr. Connie Langervan, but she's not here today, but she really spearheaded, led a lot of effort. So our work focused on advocating for thoughtful and comprehensive inclusion of Asian American Pacific Islanders studies inclusion. And we've done, since spring 2021, we actually have done quite a bit of work. One of our things that we're most proud of is we did a statewide legislative advocacy work that helped the passing of the AAPI curriculum law. And also there's a second law that which is a companion bill that is in short to establish an Asian American Heritage Commission at the NJDOE. So that's what we are, that's one of, and our other goal is to help support the development of Asian American curriculum that reflects history and contribution of Asian Americans in the United States and the world. And we also we did a lot of work building coalitions to support open access to resources and also to identify partners. And I want to also highlight a couple of things, like sort of like our impact. So since the spring of 2021, we built a statewide coalition that includes thousands of Asian American families and students in New Jersey. And also we've partnered with over 60 organizations and grassroots groups in this journey of AAPI curriculum inclusion advocacy work. And both bills were passed unanimously, and we've gathered 44 co-sponsors of AAPI curriculum bill and 34 co-sponsors of Asian American Heritage Commission bill. So we have been doing, and we're continuing working on. Now the bill is passed, so our focus now is providing curriculum resources support. And I think she's going to be one of the presenters. We have a series of AAPI curriculum resources workshops co-sponsored with NJEA, and we have teachers and curriculum content builders and consultants will be speaking.
What are the trends? Because I think Sima mentioned the changing demographics. What is the changing demographics for the AAPI? I mean, I know our demographics in New Jersey are changing pretty quickly too. So what are some of those numbers, that people may not be aware of?
Yeah, so as you're absolutely right. The country is becoming increasingly more diverse. And in many of our counties, I think we have like a majority minority situation. So if you look at all the minority groups, when you add them, there's more than 50%. And in particular, I think so with the new results of Census 2020, we've seen the Asian American population actually has increased dramatically. So in New Jersey, the Asian American population has increased by 44% in the last decade. And now we have over 1 million Asian American. In New Jersey, our residents are over 1 million identified as Asian Americans. And when we look at schools, we also observe a similar trend in student enrollment. In 2021 school year, there were about 150,000 Asian American students, and including multi-race Asian American students enrolled in public schools. We see a lot of large Asian American student body in counties such as Middlesex, Essex, Mercer, and Bergen, where in those counties, the many school district Asian American students counts for over a quarter of the total enrollment. But on the other hand, the Asian American student, they are also very widespread in the state. So in about half of the school districts, right, we see there were over 5% of Asian American students in those districts.
And what about the teaching staff? Is that, I mean, is that I'm sure the percentages are not equal to the how many we have in our state. Is that another area that you guys might be looking at down the road?
Sure, yeah, because I think generally speaking, nationwide, right, we don't have a lot of Asian American educators. And in New Jersey, just given that we are really a state with large Asian American student enrollment, I think that the Asian American educators are disproportionately underrepresented in our schools. I looked up the DOE school staffing data, right? Currently, only 2% of the teachers in New Jersey public schools identify themselves as Asian Americans. And even with that number, I think Sima can probably also tell you, many of them are in STEM or world languages. And if you look at social studies and humanities and English, there's the representation is even lower. And the similar issues also, you can see that among school administrators and supervisors who have the responsibility to determine the policy for curriculum. Right? There's barely 1% of the school administrators and the supervisors are Asian American.
Yeah, interesting. I want to go in a different direction because you mentioned the word policy, and Laura, you're a school board member. So when this comes before a board, the board has to approve curriculum. What advice would you give to a school board member when they question about what is this AAPI? Because I know you've been immersed in it, but there might be a lot of school board members who are not immersed in it. So do you want to tell them not to be afraid?
Yes, definitely do not be afraid, and definitely be excited about it. Be excited about our students learning about people that affect their lives, you know, who may or may not look like them. That should not, you know, determine who they learn about, right? Like, so as a school board member, our jobs are very, very specific. We are not responsible for running a school. We're responsible for, you know, making sure that it's run well, because our only employee is the superintendent. We're not responsible for anybody else, but we are responsible for keeping the policies that we pass accountable, to, you know, we're not even supposed to, there's a very fine line between, you know, our engagement in affecting any kind of curriculum policies, but we are responsible for, you know, making sure that the policies that we pass, that we vote for, gets implemented, and that somebody is accountable to make sure that they are implemented. We have a very specific task, but I think it's a very important task that school boards across New Jersey need to pay attention to. Just like any other policy that we pass, if we vote yes on it, then we need to make sure that that the school district complies. So yeah, and another thing I wanted to that keeps coming back to my mind when we were talking about the importance of this. I think about this movement, right? Like this movement of Make Us Visible kind of grew out of, it was a reaction to anti-Asian hate, the rise in anti-Asian hate. And so I think the antidote to that is education, because education is prevention. So we need movements. We all need, we need to continue to have these movements, but movements are reactionary. And I hope that when there's enough prevention that we won't need to have as many movements in the future, because we won't have as many, that's the hope, right? We won't have as many anti-Asian hate incidences in the schools and across the country. So, yeah.
Okay, so Sima, I'm going to go to you because you're the person in the classroom. You're the person who has to implement all these high and mighty ideas that Laura and Dr. Lu were talking about. So, and and Laura probably knows too, sometimes whenever something new comes on, it's like, oh, we have to add, there's something new to the curriculum. We're always adding something to the curriculum. We never take anything away. So what is your recommendation on how we implement this into the curriculum without creating too much extra work for your fellow teachers?
That's a great question, Ray. And I just want to say one thing. Dr. Lu, you're absolutely right. People always mistake me for a science teacher or a math teacher. And when I say I teach American literature, they're quite astonished. But I do teach American literature. And, I would say that, I don't think the AAPI curriculum bill is cramming one more thing to teaching. That is, one more unit added to the end of the year. I think a better way of thinking about how to implement the AAPI curriculum bill is in the following way. The bills allow teachers to integrate and infuse AAPI history and literature to units that already exist in the teacher's curriculum. So nothing is being tacked on as an afterthought, but integrated and infused. I mean, those are the key words, integration and infusion, for the purpose of telling a fuller story about America, about American history and the American experience. So it's not really about cramming anything additional in. Teachers are lifelong learners. I think they too want to expand their understanding of American history and the American experience. So this is, part of the learning and evolution of our thinking about American history and the American experience.
So give me an example how you would implement that with either language arts or, I would think social studies would be fairly easy to put it in there. I think before we were talking before we went on the air about the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. It would be easy to install it there. So what are examples of how you think it can be put into the curriculum with what we're doing already in our units?
Absolutely. Could I first talk a little bit about what not to do?
Oh, that's great.
Because this is something I see happening too often, and with good intentions, in fact. But this is my recommendation. First, avoid segregating the experience of various American groups. And I would say that this includes, and you may not agree with me, but I'm giving you my perspective. This includes aligning classroom teaching with the Heritage Months, which I know, like I said, I know it might sound counterproductive to creating an inclusive curriculum, but from my vantage point, teaching, for example, literature, since I'm a literature person, teaching literature by Latinx or Hispanic Americans in October, and Black Americans in February, and Asian American literature in May is just another way of segregating experiences of Americans. Okay, so that's just one view. It's my view. I would also avoid tacking on a unit at the end of the year if you have time on, say, multicultural experiences. Okay, so the story of America, it is a multicultural story from its inception. And that multicultural story needs to be infused and integrated throughout the curriculum. It's not like, oh, okay, now we're going to talk about the Chinese American experience and the building of and how they contributed to the building of the Transcontinental Railroad at the end, of westward expansion. The building of the Transcontinental Railroad is an integral part of the story of westward expansion. So what to do? So those keywords: infuse and integrate the AAPI experience. So for me, what I do in language arts, I pair texts that explore experiences across racial and ethnic backgrounds. So one successful pairing that I did and last year was pairing The Great Gatsby, which I imagine, if you were educated in this country and probably other countries too, you probably read The Great Gatsby in high school. I certainly did. And The Great Gatsby is the quintessential book about the American dream. And I love teaching that book. I would never not teach that book. I mean, I don't know what I would do if it was taken out of the curriculum. I think I would protest. I would attend, school board meetings. I would make some trouble, but it's an important book. It has its place in the history of American literature, and our students need to be exposed to this novel. So I pair a classic work with a more contemporary work to expand the our understanding of the American dream. So last year, as I was trying to say earlier, I paired The Great Gatsby with Jhumpa Lahiri's The Namesake. And The Namesake is about an Indian immigrant family who come to this country in, I think they arrive in 1968. And so, we explore and see how the American dream, is experienced, differently by different groups and in different time periods as well. Just recently, just a few weeks ago, I paired The Scarlet Letter, another classic work, which I would never take out of the American literature curriculum. I paired that with the first chapter of Maxine Hong Kingston's No Name Woman. So No Name Woman is the first chapter of The Woman Warrior. And The Woman Warrior was published in 1975. It's been around for a long time. And it is a milestone book. It is that book it was a bestseller, and it was that book that opened the gates to more Asian American writers to be accepted into the American literary canon. Maxine Hong Kingston's book, The Woman Warrior, did that. So No Name Woman is a retelling of The Scarlet Letter. So it's the most natural pairing. So again, to expand our conversation about, well, in this particular case, social shaming. That pairing across community experiences in language arts works very well. In history, you just add one additional, story or one additional voice, a primary text from, if you're talking about World War II and the bombing of Pearl Harbor, you might take a chapter from, since I'm a literature person, I'm going to give you a literature example, Julie Otsuka's When the Emperor Was Divine, which is about the experience of a Japanese American family during this time and their experience during the Japanese internment. You might just, infuse a chapter from that book.
I was influenced by Farewell to Manzanar when I think I was a freshman in college, and that was an eye opener because I didn't really know about that. Mm-hmm. And so I guess what all of you are talking about is having a more complete view of the history that happened in our country. That it's a fuller view. You're not changing the history or the books. Something more fuller. So we're coming to the end. I just glanced at my watch. That was a no-no. But any places that people can they can go to your website, I guess, if they want to get more information on resources for curriculum. Anywhere else that they can get information? And I'll reiterate, you guys are doing you're collaborating with the NJEA, putting on some webinars in April and May. And I'm sure you might do others down the road. Anything else that they can get information on?
Sure, I can just share some examples. So there have been a number of groups who are developing online resources, and many publicly available. So you can get free access. I'll give you a couple of examples that are more impactful at this point, right? The Asian American Education Project. If you go on their website, so this project was developed by two professors from California. They've curated the lesson plans for a number of years. So on their website, they have very detailed lesson plans from K to 12 arranged by grade level, and also professional training resources. And if you just navigate through that website, and you see a lot of very well planned lesson plans and the stories, including Patsy Mink's story Laura just mentioned. And also paired with the lesson plans, the PBS has a online learning media, many short clips of videos. I think it will be very well received in the classroom. The PBS Asian American Learning Media. And then there are other groups such as Immigration History Initiative. They are actually a New Jersey-based group, the IHI. So they also develop a lot of content in Asian American. And also what I like about it is because it's an immigration initiative project. So they put a particular focus, a lot of look at the immigrant stories from that lens. Then there's the South Asian American Digital Archive, because when we talk about, right, when you look at history, most people think about the Chinese laborers and Chinese Exclusion Act, but as a group, Asian Americans, we're a very diverse group, and also our history collective as a group trace back to the 1500s. Little did we know that the first Pacific migration started in the 1500s, where the Polynesians, the Chinese, and the Filipinos came to this country, and then the South Asian immigrants. So I like the South Asian American. The SARDA has many interesting stories. As you said, right, it's about complete history, but also complete view of people's stories, narratives. Those websites. Oh, then I forgot to mention New Jersey's second state passed the AAPI curriculum law. Illinois is the first state, and their advocacy group Teach, TEAACH, they have their curriculum's website. And what I like about their website is they have similar like Asian American studies, but they have this curriculum development tool called the Airtable, which basically aligns with the Asian American, the history, right? And with semantics. So not just individual lesson plans, so that, as Sima said, right, it's about infusion. It's not about just creating a class. Let's talk about Asian American history. So when you actually look at how the stories, like going back to Patsy Mink, right, you can embed that story, her story, in when you look at the civics, right, or you look at the Title IX or equal rights movement for women, right, female. And also you can look at political participation, because there's quite a bit about how she won the campaign. Our first try, it didn't work. And then there's like there are many angles you can infuse a story into social studies, and at different grade level.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to the end of this. I think I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I hope you learned a lot. And if you want more information, we gave you plenty of places to go. And so I want to thank the three of you, Laura, Sima, and Dr. Lu. I think you made a great case for the AAPI curriculum. That brings us to the end. I hope you enjoyed this and found it informative.